All right, so as you're getting your food, feel free to come fill in these tables near the front. We also have a plethora of beverages right here, if you go around this corner, to the right of the stage, if you're facing the stage. We have a Coke Freestyle machine and many fridges filled with water. So feel free to go in, grab a beverage, and then fill in these chairs and tables here closer to the front. It's much better up here, I promise you. Your questions? I hear the people that sit mostly right here, their questions normally get answered.
Hey, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for coming. Everyone that's here, I assume you're pretty seriously into politics because it's a snowstorm blizzard. And I appreciate you being here to do your civic duty and to participate. My name is Jason Walton, and I'm running for the United States Senate. And the short of it is I'm running because I really think we need to save America, particularly from security risks and from spending. I think there's other issues as well, but I'll just get right with it. Feel free while I'm talking to get up and get food and do whatever you want. And again, I appreciate you coming in during this blizzard. Do you mind asking people back there to just keep a little bit more quiet? Thanks. My wife and I live here in Provo, just down University Avenue. And we've raised 3 kids. Our oldest daughter, Jessica, I'll talk about, she passed away a few years ago. Then we have two other children, our daughter Laura and her husband Grant, which I know they're in the building, but I don't see them. Oh, there's Laura and Grant. Are both graduating. Laura and Grant are graduating from Brigham Young University, and Grant's on his way to medical school. I also have a son, Josh, who loves me so much that he's at the University of Utah Cal Berkeley Bears basketball game up in Salt Lake tonight. And so he was the Utah Valley University Fan of the Year, recognized as the Fan of the Year last year. And he's pretty close to the basketball coach, Mark Madsen, who now coaches Berkeley. And he's pretty close with their Berkeley center, Fardaz Amak, who used to be the center here at Utah Valley University. So he's up there. Coach Madsen is nice enough to get him tickets. I was originally raised in Monticello, Utah. How many of you have ever been to Monticello? All right. Steve, were you playing down there in Moab, in that area? So there you go. So when I was a kid, my dad owned a radio station called KUTA. And so when I was in elementary school, everybody, that's all they listened to. Back then, I'm 52, but back then there was only one station to listen to in Monticello. So it was just, I was used to having my dad on the radio in class. But my funnest memories were driving around, and he would broadcast the local high school basketball and football games. And in Monticello back in the time, wrestling too. They're pretty good at that, so we did that as well. And when I went to cities like Richfield, to me, I was in the big city, like wide-eyed, coming from a town of 1,800 people. Really briefly, though, my family was, for whatever reason, the men in my family aren't very good at getting married early or having kids before they're 40. or having male sons. My great-great-grandfather was one of the 6 founding families, and just my great-grandfather was in that hole in the rock expedition where he's lowered over the cliffs as a 12-year-old boy to set charges in the cliff face. And that's just my great-grandfather. Grandfather then was the mayor of Monticello, so just I'll have all that generational stuff going on. And I only say that because I think anytime we stand and look, my mom's side of the family, my grandfather, John Albert Mole, my middle name's John, after him, was fought in World War II in the Pacific Theater and has a different great heritage on my mom's side. It just is not a Utah heritage at all. But I think anytime we stop and we look at our behaviors and who we are and who we've become, it's pretty easy, at least for me, to look back and see whose shoulders I'm standing on. And maybe we can all do that. And a lot of times when I spend very much time looking and letting myself soak in and feel that gratitude, I realize I'm standing on people's faces as well, not being as grateful as I ought to have pretty frequently. So eventually I went to BYU, met my wife Kristen, who is right here, and we're exciting people. We both earned degrees in accounting at Brigham Young University, and then we started a pest control company in our garage. And how many of you here are business owners? So you know a thing or two about running a business. You learn something about budgeting, right, and how to meet a payroll. And at least for us, there were, in fact, I think that it would be a great rule, and I want to see if you here agree with me. If you could actually make it a rule or a law that everybody had to spend 5 years running a business within budget and meeting a payroll for 5 years before anybody's allowed to vote on any federal spending bill. But you think about that, we'd have a different country. We really would. It would be a completely different country, I think. I might be giving people too much credit because we haven't got into political corruption yet, but I still think they'd be a different country. But in those early years, my wife and I went, I see some friends here that were around during these times. We went many long periods of time where we weren't able to pay anything to ourselves at all so that we could take care of our employees and our customers. But my wife still makes fun of me because when I go to the Delta Lounge, I still hoard food. And it's true. And I like to stay at Motel 6. There's just some things when you're like living in a budget I have to admit I haven't been there in a while, but I had to have my family wake me up and say, come on. I just think that like when you learn to be frugal, that those are good habits, and there are good habits that I think the federal government could stand to learn a little bit about. I have never been involved in politics, and not only have I not been involved in politics, I've had quite a disdain and a mistrust for politicians, all politicians. And my platform from running is like I've just had it. Like I've had it. I'm fed up. This is not a conversation that my wife and family and I were sitting around talking about saying, hey, I should run for public office. My total experience in running a business, once we started that company out of the garage, we still own it. We grew it into a national company. And we did it on our own, when I say our own, I mean we funded it. We didn't go, there are no outside investors. We didn't go to banks and take out big lines of credit. We funded it. And I guess I'll skip some of the hardships that went along with that. But it certainly makes me have a very strong opinion about the importance of funding, but living within a budget and knowing how to meet payrolls. Eventually, I'm fortunate now that I'm able to spend most of my time mentoring a lot of young adults as they pursue their American dream of business ownership. And again, my experience is that American dream is something that career politicians that I see in DC, they treat that dream with contempt. And I don't say that gently. I really mean it when I say that. Contempt in pretty much every way. And so I literally just got to the point where I'd had it, I was fed up with it, and I said, I'm going to do something about this, and I'm going to run for public office. Because I believe that we need people of character who are not trying to advance themselves. I believe we need a restoration of just some common sense that I think is missing. And I think we need a restoration of conservative constitutional governance that I think is just far out of control. And And I'm excited to work on that. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that when I said I was running, my wife cried. It did happen. I see one of my best friends of 25 years, Kurt Anderson. We didn't talk about, you're a little bit surprised when I ran, I'm assuming. Yep. And so I didn't even have a campaign staff. I filed on January 8th. I started calling my friends. I called Senator Mike Lee, who was a friend of mine, said, here's what I'm doing. He said, that's fantastic. And a little bit surprised, and he helped me put together a dream team of a staff that I'm pretty proud of. I think we have as good of a campaign staff as you can have in the state, and a lot of the people I think that any of the campaigns would like to have around, and it's a good, full-fledged staff. I mean, look, I think they did a pretty, do you like the branding? So I do too, yeah, they did that. The truth was we made a bunch of like 25 different things, and we all got together and said, we like this one, but I don't think people are gonna like it. And then we started asking people, and it turns out people agreed with us. That was a pretty good way to go. I'm new at this. I don't know how to do political talk or do political speeches. The first town hall I had was in here, this room. First time I ever stood up without coaching, and I had Senator Mike Lee and his wife sitting right there, and former British Prime Minister Liz Truss sitting right next to him. And they weren't there because Senator Lee brought her. I had actually met Liz somewhere, and she said, I'm going to be in America, and it'd be fun to come to one of your campaign things. And so I said, okay. So that's how we had the very first one, which is intimidating, to say the least. I guess I'm going to talk a little bit about why the final hurdle that got me to run. This is hard for me to talk about, so I'm going to go through it a little bit fast. But the easy part, I guess, would be to say, for those of you who own businesses, what's your experience with government regulators? So I had the naivety in the early days to say, you know what? I want to go to the regulators because I want to do things right. I want to invite them down to my office and say, hey, I have some questions. How about this? And everyone was like, don't do that. Like, do not do that. They're not here to help you. I'm like, come on. That's ridiculous. Called them in, just got my teeth kicked in. I'm like, that was a one-off. Did it like 2 or 3 more times. And every single time was just unbelievably punished for trying to do the right thing. I don't like incentives that punish people for trying to do the right thing and cripple people, who punish people for doing right and reward people for doing wrong. I don't like policies that punish people for trying to do it right and cripple people for trying to do it wrong. In my business, that mentorship of all those young people has been an absolute honor, and it's one of the things that makes me the most fulfilled. And a lot of them are here tonight, so they will know that the main training I do is on principle-centered living. And it's about the foundation that you young men and women, and all of us need to build, that we build on the rest of our life, is because we're to be character-centered, to learn to value true principles, and we value them through our actions, definitively and purposefully. We define what our roles are, and then say how we define success within each of those roles. And then we make and keep commitments, and those commitments should first and foremost be prioritized on valuing true principles. Meaning, the way we're going to define success is if we are lying or deceitful or ungrateful, if we are not actually trying to build habits to enhance our character through how we value true principles, then we're going to define that as failure. And the worst kind of failure is when you go make a lot of money and do it dishonestly. Basically, if you're selling pest control, you don't convince people to do things that even you don't think they should do just because you can. So that's treating people as a means to an end, and it's fundamentally, I would argue, at the basis of what we might want to define as evil. So in my industry, there was, and I'm going to be light on this, there was a lot of corruption. And it got to the point where a lot of people would come to me and say, why aren't you doing this? And I'd say, because I think it's unethical at best and illegal at worst. Well, you're the only one saying that. Still what I think. And it would be, well, you're not willing to do what it takes to win. After you get that a dozen times, 50 times, 100 times, it becomes quite concerning that I have to now convince my people not to do things that I think are illegal, so, some of them felonies, and that it starts to become standard. And it made work a lot less fun for me. So I tried to do something about it, got my teeth kicked in. I realized that something of my feeling of corruption that I can see at different levels of different institutions that are federal institutions. 3 years ago, though, I just tried to put my head down and say, look, the politicians, the government bureaucrats, the regulators, just leave me be, and I'm just going to put my head down, and we're going to build our business and have our own little kingdom. 3 years ago, this is the part that's hard for me, our oldest daughter, Jessica, took her own life. She took her life right here in Provo. And that was so devastating, is so devastating. It's like a grenade going off in your soul, and it's every day. Some people say, how did you get over that? I'm not over that in any measure. And she actually did that the day my other daughter, Laura here, was returning from an LDS mission the same day. And I had to make a phone call to her and tell her on our way to the airport to come home, your only sister's gone. I always say that because our whole family, as you can imagine, that's a pretty crushing event. It's an unbelievably crushing event. And a good part of you, maybe it's gone is the right, maybe it's the wrong, I don't know, but you're changed. And when we rose from the ashes to the best we could like a phoenix, it's with a completely different perspective. And the perspective is what can we do? What good can we do? But especially for the 2 children that we have left, and hopefully our grandchildren. And the answer to that question, we looked at different foundations to support, and the truth is, I am not sure the United States is going to continue to exist in any way, shape, or form that we want it to for even 5 more years, let alone 10. That's how I feel. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm so deeply concerned about it that I decided to run for the U.S. Senate because I don't trust career politicians. I don't trust them at all, like zero. And when I talk about restoring common sense, some of the things that I think of as common sense is it just me, or do you think there's something fundamentally wrong when politicians go into office broke and they come out rich? Yes? Why do we not talk about it more? Why is it that congressmen and senators can vote and can trade stocks on companies that appear before their committees? In fact, why are they trading stocks at all? And so I'm just asking you, like, why do we not go march on Washington? Why? The truth is because, for my opinion, is we've all become demoralized. Again, these young people that I work with, some of them are here in the room, I would talk politics with them, and I could tell they were demoralized. Correct me if I'm wrong, young friends, but they don't even have the hope that politicians are honest, noble, or have any character that's worth mentioning at all. When I was a sophomore in college at BYU, I had a friend from Mexico, and I said, why did you just elect a criminal to be the president of your country? And he said, and he wasn't joking, he said, what are you talking about? They're all criminals. And he meant that. And I had that, you know how sometimes someone says something, you have something go through, like a feeling that you can't control? I had this sense of pride that went from the top to the bottom that said, I'm an American. It's not like that in America. Well, these young people have been around for the majority of the time through the Biden presidency. They've been around through the Obama presidency. And so, like, why is President Obama, with everything that he's done, and his son Hunter, why is he in the White House? I'm asking. Does anyone want to answer that question? We actually have cubes we can get out that have radios that we can throw it to you to answer. Right here. Does anyone want to, you can just yell it out too. Why is he in the White House?
Rigged elections.
Rigged elections, okay. But so let's say you're right, the elections are rigged. You're probably not going to get a whole lot of people like arguing that here. But still, more evidence has come out about stuff that's happened. Why is he still in the White House? How many people here remember when Gary Hart ran for president? Do you remember when he was caught having an affair and he dropped out? Why did he drop out? Shame. It was unconscionable that the American people would allow that. And I'm just going to put it to you that if you're going to say it's just the Democrats are the reason why he's in office, sure, that's the main reason. But it's also because we are also, as a party, demoralized. And I think we need to do something about that. I'm talking about the Republican Party. We're demoralized. We should have all been in Washington marching and saying, there's no way. We will not have that. We will not have that. And I think there's several things that our elected officials do that we have the power to vote them in and out of office and to rise up and do something about it, and we don't. A career politician, someone that goes into politics to enrich themselves personally, Can we not come to some shared consciousness that says we have to vote that person out of office, regardless of party, immediately? Why do we not do that? That's one of the reasons why I'm running for the Senate, is because I want a bullhorn to talk about these issues. Because any issue that you bring up with me tonight, spending, DEI, ESG, Green New Deal, the UN, border security, I believe I can walk you right back to corruption of politicians who, instead of having any moral conscience of character of trying to do what's right, they're trying to politically gamify the system in a way that allows them to increase in money and power. I think that there's a movement now in our country right now of people like me who are starting to stand up. I think that I met Bernie Moreno, as a friend of mine running in Ohio, also a businessman, never been in politics. There's a fellow in Nevada. I think the fact that the Senate turns over every 2 years, a third of the Senate turns over every 2 years, so on the 6-year cycle, I think that we're going to see big changes coming, but the changes have to come from you, from the grassroots, of just saying that this is what we believe in. I just don't truly believe it can come from someone who's a politician. I just don't. If I thought that the people I'm running against, I'm not saying anything negative about them, but am I the only one in Utah that feels like you've been burned before? You elected a politician and thought one thing, and they got in office and you got burned. Well, what happened? Were they lying to you when they were running? Were they lying to you after they got elected, or was there some sort of corruption? And I from the bit that I've been involved so far, it looks to me like people get creative in what they're saying when they're running for office, but maybe more importantly, they're able to rationalize when they get into the political machine, which I think all of us have, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we have an ability to rationalize why what's on our best interest is also moral. And so people will say, I know you don't really believe this, and then when they realize it's in their political best interest, somehow magically they can rationalize or justify a change on their position or a change on their stance. I hope that the reason you would vote for me is because you think I'm a man of principle and of character. I'm going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, even if we disagree. I'm not going to be bullied. I'm not going to be bought. And I really am going because I want to be a part of the growing movement to save the United States of America. Otherwise, I hope you stand with me on policy. Not only on corruption, but tell me if this is a bad idea. What if you had a rule or a law that said that if members of Congress, the Senate, can't balance the budget, that they shouldn't be paid anything? How many people would support that? Then why doesn't it get passed? Oh, because the congressmen and the senators don't want to pass that. Yeah, so vote those people out of office. So how about this? If a government can't control its spending by reducing it, I think that the courageous vote is to shut the government down. So back in 2008, 2009, we went through all that mess. What consequences were paid by people? Near as I can tell, the people who caused it were rewarded financially in every way. Who went to jail for that? All people learned is that if you go behave unethically and illegally, the same thing that I've been learning in my industry, you get rewarded for it. That if you have enough political ties, there are no consequences. My grandparents on both sides went through the Great Depression. And because they went through the Great Depression, they knew a thing or two about spending. They knew a thing or two about fiscal responsibility. I think if we would have been allowed to suffer the consequences of what we earned in 2008 and 2009, we wouldn't be $34 trillion or $35 trillion in debt right now. And the more we try to cover things like that up, I think we're doing everyone a disservice. Everyone a disservice from detaching consequences from our actions. So, and that whole consequences from actions is a thing that I think we need to, let's make a list of the countries that tax themselves into prosperity. Probably not going to find many of those, right? And that's because when you start making people pay taxes and pay people that didn't earn what they did, and the people realize that without doing anything, earning anything, they can be paid, and that's how you set up an incentive program, then expect the natural consequences of that. And that is like, it is like pulling a drain out of the bathtub to the U.S. economy, that being the water. The U.S. border. I know this is a sensitive issue. I don't like us not securing our own border, and we could have a longer, more depth discussion of what that means while we pay a lot of money to secure other borders. I don't like it. There are reasons why people would do that, but how it's happening now, I don't like it. And as far as the securing the border, the first two things that we could do that's being politicized is end catch and release and finish the wall. Mainly end catch and release. And there's some other policies that go along with it, but I want to just talk about what would happen if we just ended catch and release, that one thing. So when I went down to the border, I was with Art Del Cueto. He's one of the two, he and Brandon Judge set up my visit, and he's the two people over the Border Patrol Union for the United States. The truck that I was in was the one that Ben Shapiro was in for when he did his podcast on this. Art took us down, and we were in the Tucson sector. So on the news, we see a lot of the Texas sector. There's 300 to 400 people a day, illegal immigrants coming across the border in Texas, I think. It's about 3,000 a day that are coming across the border in Tucson, in the Tucson sector. And so here's how it works. The cartels know where all the Border Patrol agents are. They're watching them, the drones and the hills and other places. They line people up. And by the way, we created a market for human trafficking. Just want you to know that. So that's what catch and release does. We created our own market for human trafficking, sex trafficking, all of it. They give wristbands. Ted Cruz told me they give them wristbands, and those wristbands are how much the color corresponds to how much money you owe the cartel. And if you don't pay it, take it off on your family. And other things in polite company we're not going to talk about. But that's what happens. Again, economic incentive. We created that market of human trafficking. So they'll bring them to the border, and remember, they want to be caught because of catch and release. They're not trying to avoid the agents. It's a strategic thing they're doing where they bring them across, those 3,000 a day, and they present themselves, and the Border Patrol agents come and get them, and then they have to drive them 2 hours to process them. 2 hours. What do you think happens while the Border Patrol agents are gone? So if you watch some of my videos, I said I'm standing in the highest what? Fentanyl, right? Heroin, and meth trafficking areas. They're sending the Border Patrol agents away so they can bring in the drugs, and it's a daily thing. It's a daily thing, especially down there where the reservation borders. If that doesn't scare you, how about this? Art told me about 50 Egyptian nationals who were all 18 to 25 and looked very hardened, who grew up together in the same part of Egypt, who then decided to immigrate to the United States for whatever purpose they wanted to come. And they immigrate together, made the same deal. It's about a 3-month journey total. That's what Art said. And they made a deal with the cartels. So they present themselves at the border. And Art says, we get them, and we say, what are you talking about? You think we're idiots? You guys, you two people can't come in here. You're on the terror watch list. Your other 50 best friends that you grew up with or traveling with, where do you want a ticket to? Mapleton? Provo? Springville? Where do you want to go? So stuff like that, along with all the Chinese nationals that are coming across in California, and I've heard of other groups of 50 to 100 or more of military-age young men from the Middle East who are just coming across the Mexican border to do who knows what, because our policy advisors will not end catch and release. All they have to do is end catch and release, because what happens then is when they show up, they say, no, you cannot come in the United States, and then you have people say, well, I want to come in the United States for amnesty. No, you cannot come in here for you might get granted amnesty, but you don't get to come in here and wait. Because right now they're getting back to them. They'll tell them, we'll get back to you sometime between now and 2030. And I'm being generous when I say that, because I was actually told a number higher. Does that mean that we end all immigration? No. Like, our country depends on lawful, legal immigration. I'm saying that we quit mucking it up. I think that we've have an immigration opportunity, and we managed to just mess the whole thing up, snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory. And our enemies are smart. They take advantage of it in every possible way that they can. And our politicians let it happen. I'll say it again, because in my opinion, they're only looking at the situation of how they can get political gain from it. That's it. And that bothers me. I believe that we could talk about, I don't know how much you want to talk about this, but the ESG, the Green New Deal, I think those things are poison to American capitalism. I don't think they're good. The UN, I don't know if you heard, but I think it's Martin Griffiths, who's the UN bureaucrat, said that Hamas is not a terrorist group. So here we go. Now your tax dollars are being taken out of your wallet, and they're being used to support a terrorist group. And I think it's time that we leave the UN, and we should have done it a long time ago. So I think we've been taken advantage of. Sounds like some of you agree with that one. I honestly don't know why I'm sorry. I think we're still in the UN because politicians are inherently corrupt and they see it for political gamesmanship. You know, from my talking to people around for a while, I also believe, I know that foreign companies try to get into our politicians and some of our other economic business leaders, like try to get dirt on them or pay them off. And I think maybe you've heard some things about Hillary Clinton and her uranium deals with Putin and Russia. Why do we not talk about that? Like, that's ridiculous. It is crazy. It's absurd. But I think there's a lot more of that than we realize. So when people say, hey, we want to have this energy, there's going to be X amount of cars have to be electric by 2030. Not only do we not have the grid to support it, but China makes 57% of the electrical vehicles. And when we get to the mining components of it, the minerals that go into it, they do more than that. And then they own the mines that do that in Africa, while at the same time, the government refuses to give those mining permits for those minerals to people here in America. So you tell me, who's making the Green New Deal policy? Because it sounds like China's writing it, and they're using the politicians they control to implement it. I don't like it. And again, I can go through everything, but I'm going to start getting overheated. So I'll pause for a minute. Anyway, so as I said before, I think that I think there's a path forward. If that sounded bad, in every single one of these things, there's a solution. I think America's at a tipping point. That's why I'm running for the United States Senate. I'm worried. But it isn't too late, and there's a message of hope. And the message of hope is if we all stand up to the bureaucracy, to the government, to the establishment, to career politicians, we can make a difference and we can make a change. The first things that we're going to do is we're going to take back the Senate. We're going to keep the House. We are going to defeat Biden. We're going to elect a conservative president. I hope that, and I know it's controversial, that conservative president's Donald Trump, and we can get into the list of things that I think that he did and will do from his past presidency. I know that I like his judges, and I could talk more about that in a little bit. But and then I hope that I humbly ask that each of you will stand with me in that. I ask for your vote. I'm in a job interview, and I'm asking you, can I please have this job that I'll donate all the money back to Utah charities and causes to. So I appreciate you coming here tonight, and I'll open up for questions. Yes, please. What's your? Can we get a square so everyone can hear his question? Right here up front.
Hi, my name's Kevin Coleman. I live in Spanish Fork now. I'm a general contractor by trade.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you for having this, and I'm grateful to be here tonight because I'm learning some things that I'm hearing what I wanted to hear and not just rhetoric.
Well, you know what? Here's the truth. I just want to speak that. I appreciate that. But how do you know when someone's giving you rhetoric or not? I appreciate that you believe me, but I think we know we're not giving rhetoric. I have several buddies who are Navy SEALs, and if a Navy SEAL says to you, hey, you could have gone through BUDS, he's making fun of you. Because the way you know someone can go through BUDS is they go through BUDS. So the way you'll know that it's not rhetoric is I get in Washington, I do what I say that I'm going to do. So, and that is true. And I believe that's why you go with an outsider or someone that's built and run a business and knows how to budget and it's just in their blood. But I hope that you'll give me the opportunity to prove to you that it's not rhetoric.
Thank you. I've had 66 years of sifting bullshit, so I understand what's going on. A couple of things. I'm sick to death of laws and rules being created by bureaucracies instead of elected officials.
Preach on, brother.
Okay? And I'm talking about fuel costs, electric mandates, and all of that crap that they're shoving down our throat that doesn't work. I don't care how many electric cars we have to build by 2030, there's no infrastructure to take care of them. I mean, if you had a fleet of trucks, it would take as much power as it does to operate a city in order to develop the trucks. Or
we're also given energy guidelines for to change over from fossil fuels, that's also impossible.
Right.
Like to do the changeover is physically impossible, but those
Okay.
are the guidelines, yeah.
I pull trailers and equipment every day, and I drive a Duramax, and I'm damn glad to have it. I don't want an electric vehicle, because there's one thing about an electric vehicle, or a gas-powered vehicle, at least or a fuel-powered, it'll at least get me home. Second thing is especially important to me, and at my age, there's a lot of young guys here, a lot of older people too, but I am sick to death of the government destroying our economy and the value of our dollar. Because anybody that's on a fixed income just lost 40% of everything that they have. And for the rest of their life, they're not going to get that back. It doesn't matter whether stocks go up, they've still lost 40% of the value of their dollar. And I'm sick of government devaluing our dollar. And the idea that the Democrats, especially in the Senate and the House, have these monstrous spending bills and spend trillions of dollars that are basically unauthorized because of omnibus bills, and everybody signing stuff that they don't know what they're signing, shows me that Congress, both houses, have abdicated their responsibility to the American citizens so that they can place blame on the executive branch. So-and-so as president ran up the deficit this far. Well, he doesn't have a checkbook. Congress does.
Yes, sir.
And so I just want the truth, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I suppose other people have some questions.
Well, I want to address a couple of those things, because those are, you hit a couple subjects that are near and dear to me that I normally cover. I just thought I'd rambled on too long. Let's get to the federal bureaucracies first. I believe this country was sacredly and divinely appointed, and the Constitution was divinely inspired. I believe that strongly. And I don't think it's just something that happened in the 1770s and 80s and 90s. The people who founded the United States of America came from tyranny, where they were oppressed by kings and queens, and they didn't have rights. They didn't have the right to worship. They didn't have the right to keep what they've earned, and they were looking for freedom. And that was impressed upon them for hundreds of years. And then, just is it coincidentally that there's this giant landmass with the Pacific Ocean on one side, the Atlantic Ocean on the other side, with Canada and Mexico, just absolutely prepared and waiting in every imaginable way. People came. And then the experiment began. It arrived in the 1600s. By the end of the 1700s, they tried different forms of government. Articles of Confederation didn't work so well. So after the Articles of Confederation, they put up, they came up with the Constitution. Several hard-fought battles, what was the first name again? Kevin brought up. Several hard-fought battles because that were trying to protect them from tyranny. And they were saying, we want to make sure that this federal power is limited in scope and power and authority. We want to keep the main sacred authority here locally in our communities and with our states. They went to great lengths to outline the three articles of the Constitution. And then there was some fighting about it, about Article 1, Section 8, specifically about the necessary and proper clause and the Commerce Clause. And so they tried to patch it up with the 10th Amendment. Nope, it's just these things. This is what the federal government do, and anything else you can imagine goes to the states. Well, it started getting challenging early on by Alexander Hamilton, saying, well, we need a national bank. That's necessary and proper. And, he was probably right when he said, we can't have currencies in all the different states, so he properly said, we're going to use this Article 1, Section 8 Commerce Clause that says the federal government can strike down currencies with the Commerce Clause. Also, the states shouldn't be able to just tax each other. So that's going to affect commerce. So we're going to strike that down. Okay. But then, if you look what happened when the Constitution was put into effect, between the day it was signed and the next 150 years, the greatest civilization which has ever existed on this planet sprung into existence. What we have done in the United States of America, who we became, is greater than Babylon, Rome, Constantinople, or anyone. And it's because of the people, their value system, and the Constitution. The Constitution is not the flag. It is not a symbol. It is not some arbitrary thing. It is the actual instrument that is providing your freedom and your liberty right now, today, as we're sitting here. At least it's trying to, because we're doing our best to destroy it, fracture it, and tarnish it. And where I believe it was really fractured when it comes to what you were talking about, the vertical axis of the Constitution, federalism, that's the federal and state authority, and then you have the horizontal axis, which is the separation of powers. Those bureaucracies that you mentioned sprung from this. There were several Supreme Court cases where that commerce and necessary proper clause were challenged. But the one that I refer to as the great fracture was Wickard-Filburn, where this farmer just wanted to grow some wheat for his own farm animals. That's it. What happened was FDR came and had this great New Deal. We're going to talk about Democrat branding versus Republican branding. They're way better at that than us. The Great New Deal, affordable health care. I mean, they're so good at like naming it the opposite of what it is. This one justice wouldn't allow him to implement his Great New Deal. It's unconstitutional, which it is. So he threatened to pack the court with 15 justices. This justice reversed his decision, and after a few cases later, the Wickard-Filburn case came out where the federal government says, nope, we're using the Commerce Clause of Article 1, Section 8 to say that we get to regulate you of what you grow on your own farm and how much you can grow on your own farm. That is, I call, the great fracture. Because if the government could come in on your own land and farm and dictate what you can and can't grow and say it's necessary, use something called the aggregation principle, and say, so then they can do anything. And for me, from my perspective, big government spread out of that. And now what you have is a constitution where all these bureaucracies spread out. They're kind of more controlled by the executive. But if I put down here on the floor all of the laws that the Congress, the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate passed and the President signed, it'd be about this high. And if I made a list of if I brought out the Federal Register from last year, which is what you said, Kevin, it's the regulation, the unelected officials who are not responsible to you in any way, a total sacrilege of what the Constitution was, of trying to make elected officials and lawmakers responsible to the electorate. Article 1 is Congress. They make the laws. Article 2 is the executive. They carry out the laws. Article 3 of the Constitution is the judicial. They carry out the laws. Of all the powers of government, which one is the most powerful, do you think? Article 1, making the laws. That's why the House of Representatives is accountable to you. Every 2 years you can vote them in and out. Us senators, like Kevin pointed out, you better be a little more careful with us. 6 years. I can say whatever I want to you tonight and then go do whatever I want for the next 4 years and then just change what I'm doing the last 2 to try to get voted again. I think we've seen that before, haven't we? Yeah, of course we have. So how is it possible? What would the Founding Fathers think? And it's just everything. This is what oils up and mucks up the machine. I call it the rust or the varnish on the Constitution. It's not meant to be that federal regulators get to come up with their own regulations that have binding effect of law on you. For example, and you came up with some good ones. I don't remember if I finished, but if I made the Federal Register, it'd be 13 feet high, just from last year, 12 to 13 feet high, literally. So let's say there's an assault rifle. That's a Democrat way of terming it. Let's say there's a rifle. And in that rifle, it's perfectly legal to own. But some government bureaucrat or regulator that you never voted into office, he's never accountable to you or to the people, says, well, if it has these 2 or 3 things on it, then now it's a felony. And now there's 10,000 felons in the United States. Does that seem right to you? Does that seem like what the whole Constitution was about? Does that seem like proper separation of powers? Now, that's exactly what's happening. And so can I come up with some solutions now? We have gone 40 years without being able to challenge any of that bureaucratic garbage that's been done. We got our first ruling recently that overturned a principle called the Chevron Doctrine. Didn't quite overturn it. It took a chink at it. It's a fight in the right direction. The Chevron Doctrine, for a lack of a simpler way of saying it, was This is ridiculous. But it was something that said, if Kevin has if I make a regulation, Kevin doesn't like it, and he wants to sue me, the Chevron doctrine said, before we proceed to court, we're going to defer to the person, to the bureaucracy that made it. And I'll go back and go, no, I'm sorry, Kevin, I disagree with you. That's the Chevron doctrine. We just got our first case about a month ago that took a chink out of that because I think of some of these Trump justices in the court we're seeing. And there's some other cases. There's a Loper case, and I forget the other one that has to do with some fishermen in Alaska. And I won't bore you with the details of the case, but it has to do with them being forced to pay for the regulators to come on their boat to regulate them. Like, wait a minute, we didn't vote that that would have to happen. Regulators said, bureaucrats said, oh, no, we just passed a regulation. And so they challenged it, and the Supreme Court's going to hear it. Hopefully they'll overturn it, because it went Chevron doctrine back to them and said, no, we still think we can. Now the Supreme Court will overturn that. That's great, because that means it's making it easier to challenge that bureaucracy. The other thing is Senator Mike Lee is putting together some things called the REINS Act. And I encourage you to look into this. The REINS Act are bills that say if any federal bureaucracy passes a regulation that's going to have more than $100 million of economic impact, and that's pretty much everything, then it has to be voted on by the House and the Senate. I know it sounds like you're missing something, because it always should have been voted on by the House and the Senate. But at least we can get some of those things in law. So those REINS Act could be implemented in different ways, and we can start taking some of that back. So I look forward to working with Senator Mike Lee on that, of getting some of that legislation passed. I look forward on getting better justice. Well, yeah, thank you, yeah. Yeah. Senator Lee's amazing. I promise you, that's somebody who's not getting rich and getting rich in office. It's a man of integrity and a man of principle. What was the second part of your question? Because I think I only hit the regulation. How did you start that?
Well, it has to do a lot with just inflation and Congress abdicating their responsibility, because they're the ones supposed to make the laws.
Right, so they start printing money, doing that.
Instead of not doing anything, blaming it on the president.
Yep.
And bureaucracies get away with murder.
My wife and I, running our businesses, we went during COVID, a period of six to 8 months, where we couldn't hire people. We probably had nationwide 2,000 to 3,000 people, as an estimate, don't hold me to that, turn down jobs because we couldn't pay them as much as the government was paying them not to work. I'm competing with the federal government. I was competing with the federal government, and I couldn't pay enough, and I was just trying to pay even if they weren't even really working too. I was trying to keep the economy and stuff going and be a good employer. I could not hire people because the federal government would pay more than I could to do nothing. Yeah, I don't think that's very good for inflation. You start printing money like that. Another question, I'll be more brief. Yes, in the back. Yeah. Here comes a cube your way. You could throw those things. That's why we made them Nerf.
Hey, Jason, it's me, Will, again.
Oh, hey, Will.
I work for you.
Yeah.
Was in one of your other town halls. I think one of the big problems with how President Biden got elected into office was there were a lot of people who felt that the country was too polarized in one direction and too polarized in the other direction, and they were looking for that middle of the aisle candidate who could offer some sort of sensibility and like a bit of balance. I personally was considering this for a really long time, and one of the things that I've kind of come to the understanding of is we don't really share a mythos as a country anymore. We don't have a shared understanding, or we don't have those shared principles any longer because of where we live. Like, there are people who live in cities are a lot more like community-centric and value that sort of thing, but the people who live in agrarian areas and rural areas, they're more independence-focused. So it's difficult to have like a common leader who can commonly represent all of our values when we don't have that base, I guess you could say, education. And I think that that's kind of where it comes down to on a lot of issues, is we don't really have a shared principle as a nation the way that we used to when we had a common enemy or when we had common beliefs. We used to roll bandages and plant victory gardens. What is your plan necessarily for
To change that?
yeah, to kind of unify
Thank you
the
for asking
nation?
that question, Will. So let's hit it. I think there's two things. That's a great question. The first one is, I want you to understand that that there are people within this country and foreign nationals who are waging a Machiavellian war to try to destroy us. And by Machiavellian, I mean they're not strong enough yet to militarily do it. And so they're doing the next best thing that would be right out of Machiavelli. And they're bombarding you to make you think that capitalism is evil, to make you not know what a man or a woman is, to make you confused about some of the most basic things. When I was a kid, you'd think that I'd never dreamed that you're going to see men competing in female athletics, and everyone's saying, well, if you don't believe that you have some sort of phobia. It's ridiculous. So that assault is to make you think that the Constitution is outdated, that it's stupid, that it's wrong, that capitalism's evil, that Marxism is the path. There is an all-out billions of dollars to spend every year to reprogram your generation and the rest of America to feel that way. That's what you're up against. So the reason I want to say that is like that from all of us, we need to, number one, realize that the value of the Constitution. If we will just scrape off the tarnish and start using it the way it was meant to be used, then we'll keep flourishing, and we will explode with prosperity the way we had it before. We will reach new limits. So we need to start talking about it more. So we need to frame those discussions instead of, hey, you're an inhuman monster because you believe that way. Instead, just say, explain this to me constitutionally. And make those, like, let's stand on the Constitution. Because when you're not on the Constitution, then we don't, it's more difficult to have those conversations. Next, as a party, we need to be better at framing things, like the whole Green New Deal that's not green, the Anti-Inflation Act that's meant to create inflation, the affordable health care, which is my health care went up 25, 30%, didn't it, Kristen, year one with the affordable health care? And we can go on and on and on. But the left has done a good job of framing you and foreign countries as you're an insurrectionist, you're a bigot, you're homophobic, you're a racist, you're this. And not only that, they've made it to where you're even silent, where you don't even feel like you can talk. Because even if you share your opinion, it's wrong and it's horrible. So I think as a people, we need to stand up. I'm not saying go and fight and be mean. And by mean, I mean calling people names, but that doesn't mean you don't stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean you should compromise where you shouldn't compromise. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the other way we can come to shared values, Will, is when you say middle of the road, is when you say, where's the middle of the road candidate? I don't know what you mean. It makes me nervous that you're talking about Mitch McConnell, who's middle of the road, but to me, all he's doing is passing the Democrat agenda, left, right, and around the corner. That's not middle of the road to me. So middle of the road, when I think of that, I just think of saying, instead of saying middle, why don't we come with the shared values that I was talking about early? Shared principled values that say, look, I don't care who the person is. I don't care what party they're in. I don't care how much you like that person, he, her, she, whatever. If they are enriching themselves politically, they have to go. Are they really just interviewing for the lobbyist position they're going to get next? Are they trading stocks? Instead of saying, yeah, but no, not yeah, but get them out of office. That to me is the middle ground that we should all be able to agree on, is to say we will not take corruption. You're going to be a public servant or you're going to be gone. And we should, that's the conversation, you want what conversation I'm going to have, it's that conversation. Let me share with you a few conversations I've had since I've been running for Senate. And right at the beginning I said I was going to pull back the curtain and tell you what I saw. Are you ready to hear it? Okay. Sitting with Mike Lee one-on-one, and these stories I'm going to share with you are straight from either Mike Lee or Ted Cruz or both of them at the same time. When you watch what Mike Lee will say, Senator Lee, he will say often, why are we giving a bill at 11 o'clock at night that we have to vote on the next day? Can we not have time to read the bill? Now, if you're running for the U.S. Senate and you're sitting with Mike Lee, what he says is, oh, by the way, you're going to be threatened by Mitch McConnell and his money. He'll hold a meeting, and this is the whole meeting, and you tell me what he means by this. I have a bill coming out next week. I hope you all vote for it. It's a good bill. By the way, the leader fund's up to $600 million. What does that mean? You don't need to see the bill because there's no reason for you to read the bill. I'm already telling you how you're going to vote for that bill. And if you don't do it, I'll make sure that you're not in office next time. Everybody that I've talked to, when they're trying to see if I'm up to snuff, sits me down and say, when McConnell or Senate leadership comes and threatens you, and threatens you, and I'm not going to get in all the different ways that can happen, but the leader fund is the main way that it's done, the most common way that it's done, because it's constant. Like, will you stand up to it or will you cow down to it? That's why I'm saying you need to elect people in office who aren't counting on their income. I'm just saying it straight to you right now, of being in office, or they will fold. You can't count on people who are trying to upstep their political circles, and the main thing they want is what their next Senate leadership position is going to be. You need to elect people. We need to elect people who are character-based first, and who are going to stand up to corruption no matter what. And preferably people like me, where if you vote me out of office, that's great. My wife doesn't want me going to the Senate anyway, so I'll just go home and enjoy life with my family. But if you'll have me, I'm still interviewing for the job, because I'm trying to make it. I'm not even saying the whole U.S. can be shared for 200 more years. I'm just trying to make it the United States around for one more generation, and then pass it on to the next people. And please help us change the way that we're thinking. Not done with the Mitch McConnell thing, though. Senator Mike Lee and Senator Ted Cruz voted against Mitch McConnell for Senate leadership. The reason the Democrats put $65 million into the Beto O'Rourke campaign 6 years ago, Beto O'Rourke ran against Ted Cruz, is because they knew it was a vulnerable spot. Only because Ted Cruz voted against Mitch McConnell, and they knew Mitch McConnell wouldn't support him with the Senate Leader Fund. Ted Cruz told me at least 4 times. Mitch McConnell gave me 0. I went to him and said, please, we don't want this to go Democrat. We don't just want the Senate to go Democrat. You got to help. Nope. When Mike Lee was challenged by Evan McMullin, one of the reasons why the Democrats didn't field a candidate and Evan McMullin was because they knew that Mike Lee was vulnerable. Why? Because Mitch McConnell would not support him with the leader fund. Why? Because he didn't vote for him for Senate leader. Mike Lee went to him twice. He told me this himself, one-on-one, man-to-man. Second time, put his arm around him, and Mike said, I really need help. All right, Mike, I'm going to help you out. Here's the help I'm going to give you. Don't be afraid to spend in the negative on this one. It's important. Well, thank you. After the election, unless Mike Lee is lying to me, and I'm sure he's not because Ted Cruz said he was there too and said he heard it as well, Mitch McConnell got the senators together and said, well, we had a good election. Gave Tim $20 million. I gave Anthony $15 million. I gave Jeremy $30 million. Oh, and I helped out Mike too. It's only 40-something senators that are Republican. They all know what he did for Mike. And just so there's a perfect clarity, he says that so the next time he comes in and says, hey, there's a bill coming out that I'm going to give you at 11 o'clock at night, and I expect you to vote for it. By the way, the leader fund's at $600 million. How un-American is that? So I want you to think about it. First bill of each Senate cycle, Schumer introduces, the Democrat leader, Senator Schumer, introduces a bill to do 3 things. The first one he already has. And the first one is institute catch and release. Done. Second one, give every illegal immigrant an ID as soon as they cross the border. Third, let them vote. If that happens, you have a one-party system. I find it despicable that Mitch McConnell or any Senate leader is so concerned that they want to control that fund. It doesn't matter whether the majority or the minority leader. They just want to control their $400, $500, $600 million fund so they can kowtow and beat up the other Republicans and tell them how to vote. That is against every principle that was founded on by our founding fathers. That instead of having 100 senators together reading stuff, that there's just 4 people in both houses of Congress controlling a leader fund. You want to know where the deep state is? All the deep state has to do is go threaten any one of those leader funds, go give them each $20 million to say, keep this, I don't care which one, don't put this legislation in Congress, don't pass that. And if they do, all they have to do is go threaten that leader. That's it. Why aren't people talking about that? Why? Why am I the only one talking about it? That's the deep state right in front of you. It's because people are afraid to be unelected, because you start talking like that, and the leader fund starts going against you, and you don't get put into office. If nobody's going to stand up and start talking about the issues that need to be talked about, corruption, if no one will do that, then America, it's not a good future. So again, I appreciate you for coming. If you have other questions, I've taken too long. I'll stick around afterwards. You can feel free to ask them to me. I'm Jason Walton. I'm running for the United States Senate, and I humbly ask for you to come support and stand with me. Thank you.
All right, before you guys head out, we have Christy Henshaw here, who is the chair of the Utah Republican Party, and she's going to come speak to us for about just 5 minutes about caucus night this upcoming Tuesday. So everyone, a big round of applause for Christy.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm excited because so many of you guys are young, and that doesn't happen to us a lot. And so we are super excited to look around this room. I have Mike Carpenter back there. Mike, if you'll raise your hand. Mike's on our leadership team. He is our tech officer, and he's incredible. Our website looks great. So first off, I have a disclaimer because I have a neutrality clause. And so I am here to tell you about caucus, and we appreciate all of our good candidates and grateful that they're doing town halls like this. So raise your hand if you know what caucus is. Oh, okay, very good. Okay, so let me tell you why caucus is the best system. Because a lot of people lately have, there's been articles about people saying, oh, it's not accessible, and so let me tell you, caucus goes a little bit like this, and this is simple. I taught school, so I made this up, and I thought, this is a pretty good explanation for caucus. So it says, caucus just a phone call away, representative government at its best. So you're at home and you have a great idea, or a problem arises, and you call your precinct chair, and they agree that you need assistance. Your precinct chair gets you in touch with your house chair, and your house chair connects you with your elected official, state or federal. Okay, this is a little simplistic, but this really actually happens all the time with me. And at the bottom it says, can you name another system with similar access to those voting on your freedom or your money? So to help keep your freedom and your money, support the caucus system. So the question is, and if you're not really familiar with how government works, the alternative to caucus is what's called a jungle primary. And that's essentially where money and flyers and billboards are what control the process and how they get into the primary. Caucus is you going to your community in your neighborhood and you guys having a discussion about what your values are and you sending the best representative to come and vote in our convention and go through the process of vetting the candidates and voting that way. There's no better system. And so there are some states that had caucus and they've lost it. There's only about 7 states left that still have caucus. And when we communicate with those states, every single one of them says, save your caucus. If not, it's just big money, big business, and that's what runs your elections. So caucus is this Tuesday. We're super excited to have it. If you have not pre-registered, you can do that at ucrp.org, or you can go to UTGOP. And there's a big red button on both of those, and it asks you for your information. It'll tell you where your precinct is. It'll tell you where to go on Tuesday. And you usually go to a local school, and you go in, and you have a conversation. You have local elections, and they elect state delegates and county delegates. And so that is ucrp.org, and pre-register there. And have everybody pre-register. Even if you can't come, you can vote absentee. And this is a presidential preference poll. And the difference between a poll and a primary is just who runs it. So a poll is run by the party, a primary is run by the state. And so we ran a poll, it still binds our delegates in the first vote, and so you can cast a ballot there. But more importantly, you can communicate with your neighbors about what you guys are worried about and what kind of people you want to elect. And if you have the time in March and April, we have a lot of events. But then you can come and vet those candidates and vote in our county for all of our county officials at our county convention, and then the week after that would be our state convention. And so when I appreciated Jason's comments so much, and when he talked about our values, oftentimes, and who we want to elect, oftentimes it's an education issue for ourselves as well. And so if we don't understand how our government works and why it works the way that it does, then we don't know, we're easily convinced when other people come to us and try and convince us to change that form of government. Caucus is one of those things, so we feel really passionate. We have a great team, a new team that's doing a lot of changes, and so one of the things that we're looking at is a campaign called Rethink Republican. We feel like there's been a lot of propaganda to smear Republicans and a lot of people thinking that we don't have a heart, and that's one of the criticisms of the youth is, hey, we appreciate that Republicans want to pay their bills, but we have a heart. And so we have some billboards that we're hoping to put up really soon that say things like the party that was started to end slavery, hashtag Rethink Republican. We've got really good stuff going. We want to include the youth, and we want to educate them on the process and let them know that their voice matters. And the best way for your voice to be counted is through the caucus system, because you really can pick up your phone and call your precinct chair. They can call their house chair. They call me, and I can get them in touch with pretty much anybody in the state or their federal because of the caucus system, because of the convention system. We know all these candidates. So also, if you're interested and you do not become a delegate, you can still come to our debates that we're having. We're going to have a Senate debate. We also have an Elephant Society that they come and talk at. We're going to have a governor's debate. We're going to try and get the governor to come, but I know the other ones said that they'll come to Utah County. So we'll have that posted on our website, the debates that we're going to have, the locations for that type of stuff, but you can be involved as you want. And so Jason mentioned this a little bit, but raise your hand if your level of fear is at a 10 for where our country's at. And yeah, that's what got me involved too. So I so appreciated him making the comments about why he's running. It was the same reason I ran. And my awesome husband let me take a year off of my job to do this. So in Utah County, we're dead serious about this. My whole team is, and Republican is not what you think it was. It is, I was just telling, I say this to my team a lot, but for Republicans, everybody has this idea of what the news has told them, and it's kind of really simple. Oftentimes it's like we think, you go to a job and you make money, we want you to keep that money. And so I think we can agree on a lot of those things, but there has been a lot of, propaganda that has made people think that we're radical or that we're extreme, and it really comes down to the things that are in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, private property rights, those types of things. So check out our website, ucrp.org. Please register for caucus, whether you can be there or not. And any way that we can assist you in this process, we hope that we see you at our county convention or the state convention. So thank you.
All right, thanks everybody for coming. Feel free to stay and mingle, ask Jason questions if you'd like a little bit more food or any beverages or snacks or ice cream. It's all around the corner. Thanks for coming out. Also, if you'd like to donate, we are trying to do a grassroots effort and collect as many donations as possible, even if it's just $5, $10, $50, $1,000, $9,800. Feel free to scan this QR code, and it'll take you to the link where you can donate, and there's also donation forms at the back table. Thank you so much.